Hi, good evening. Buenas tardes. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Espero que estés bien. We are here for another week. We're very excited to be in our third chapter of Narnia. Estamos muy emocionados para estar en nuestra tercera semana, en nuestro tercero capítulo en el libro de Narnia. This is an English class for Spanish speakers. Esta es una clase para los hispanohablantes para aprender inglés. We have been modifying our format a little bit. We are going to try and add in more Spanish. Estamos modificando nuestro formato un poco, añadiendo más español. So please bear with us as we make changes and we grow and change. Por favor, ten paciencia con nosotros mientras que estamos cambiando y todo eso. All right. Today we're going to be talking about some reading tips, or in other words, some strategies that I would like to share with you all, the audience, our readers, because I understand, we're reading together. I do encourage you to go read on your own, but you guys might need a little bit of help. I'm here to help you. So today we're going to talk specifically about, okay, well, what do I do when I read a new vocab word? ¿Qué hago cuando encuentro una palabra nueva, un vocabulario nuevo? ¿Qué hago para que no lo olvide? All right, so let's look at that. How can we, what are some strategies? I'm going to share with you a little trick I do. Voy a compartir un truco. Yeah, un truco con vosotros esta noche. And we should have a lot of fun. Espero que vayamos a tener mucho diversión mientras de leer y todo. All right. Little review from last week. Vamos a repasar un poco la semana pasada. Last week, the topic, the theme rather, el tema era de preguntando preguntas, hacer preguntas. It was about asking questions, right? Making questions, asking questions. And we looked throughout chapter 2 about Lucy, the story of Lucy, and the story of Tumnus and her adventure in Narnia, the brief adventure that she had there, the first one you could say, her going in and coming back to the house where the children are staying. If you remember the last two chapters, if you don't, that's all right. You can go back on the channel. You'll find all the last couple readings. So don't worry about that. So we looked at the questions, right? We looked at questions and we saw the questions that they asked each other. So there are a couple ways you can ask questions in English, just like any language. One of them is inversión, or intercambio del sujeto y el verbo, right? So you can change the subject and the verb. When you switch them, in English, this is automatically making the sentence a question. That's a very common one I wanted to highlight once again. Of course, you don't have to do it, right? When you have the inversion, when you have a switched pronoun and verb, for example, we looked at the example last week, are you American, right? The question, are you American? ¿Eres americano, right? There is inflection, but the inversion is here is making it a question, right? Otherwise, it's you are American. That is a statement, right? But be careful, ojo. I could make this a question. Yo lo podría hacer una pregunta en varias formas, right? Una forma muy sencilla en inglés es la inflexión del tono, right? Just like in Spanish, como en español. You are American, right? That is making it a question by the sound. Por el sonido, le hace una pregunta. Other way you could do it is by, like we just talked about, switching, cambiando la posición del pronombre, the pronoun y el verbo, the verb. So, are you American? ¿Eres americano? All right. So I think that's a sufficient review of questions. There's a lot more to it, obviously. Es obvio que hay, claro, más que ver con las preguntas. If you want to look at more questions in detail, go to last week's reading and you'll get a lot of help. And of course, as always, if you need more help, you can reach out to me. I'm Peter Williams. I'm here to help you. We're at the Potter's House Christian Church in San Jose, California. Here to help you. So contact us and we'll try and get you your questions answered. So today, like I said, we're going to be looking at strategies, or in Spanish, estrategias, to read, para leer, right? So how can you do that? Well, I recommend having a growing list of vocab words. Or, since we're doing this in a reading style, since we're reading a chapter book, right? So we have chapters, make a vocab list in a document. Today we're going to use Google Docs. You can use Microsoft, doesn't matter. Make a vocab list for each chapter. That's what I would recommend. Yo recomiendo a vosotros que hagáis una lista de vocabulario para cada capítulo. Y así, cada vez que quieras regresar a la lista, puedes revisar las palabras y ahí vas a tener no solamente las palabras, claro, pero vas a tener la definición y una palabra sinónima. Y vamos a ver de lo que se trata y todo. We're going to look at this again and see what it's all about as we do it. So, where do you start? Obviously, you're going to start with the reading. So let's turn to chapter 3. If you're looking for this link, we're going to leave it in the description. You can also get it from last week's video. So if you're watching for the first time, we don't have the link. You can go back real fast. And hopefully by the time you get back, we still haven't moved on too far. But you can go back to that list the last week, get the link, and come back. And on that link, you're going to find the text for today's chapter 3 en español. Si no tienes el link del capítulo del libro, puedes regresar ahora mismo al video de la semana pasada, la lectura pasada, y ahí puedes encontrar el link y abrirlo y leer con nosotros y regresar y leer con nosotros. Okay, vamos a comenzar vamos a comenzar leyendo, pero vamos a hacer una pausa para demostrar de lo que decía, de hacer la lista y todo. Entonces, vas a necesitar 3 links, 3 páginas, o en español es pestañas, pestañas, or tabs in English. You're going to need 3 tabs. You're going to need a document, right? And you can title it vocab list if you like. You're going to need a dictionary, a translator dictionary. Vas a necesitar un diccionario para traducir las palabras. Yo recomiendo un sitio de web, se llama wordreference.com. También está en el video de la semana pasada. There, it's a very good, you'll see why I recommend it in a second. It's a very good dictionary, Spanish to English. It's very helpful and se ayuda mucho, and I recommend it. So that's the second one you're going to need. And of course, you're going to need the link for today's story. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to start in chapter 3, and it's Edmund and the Wardrobe, or Edmundo y el Armario, or Edmund. Sometimes people translate the name as Edmundo, sometimes they don't. It kind of depends. All right, so Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other 3. Okay, so let's just stop there. Vamos a hacer la pausa aquí. All right, so let's say, déjanos decir that I know all the words except one. Let's say I know all the words except one. Déjanos decir que yo sé todas las palabras en esa oración, sino una. And let's say it's passage. What is passage? Well, in English, I don't know. Let's say I don't know. Let's look at the dictionary. So we're going to go to the dictionary. I'm going to go to that tab that we have open. And we're going to type in P-A-S-S-A-G-E. P-A-S-S-A-G-E. Passage, right? Click return or enter. And you should find a list of translations. Okay. You'll see that there's many, right? Hay varias traducciones. Y vamos a buscar a lo que se refiere en el contexto del capítulo, de la oración. Y si regresamos al libro, leemos que dice que Lucy ran out of the empty room. Lucía corrió fuera de un cuarto, del cuarto o la habitación vacía, hacia sorry, I'm not going to say the word just yet. All right, into the passage, right? Hacia el passage, y encontró los otros, o los demás. All right, so what we got here, lo que tenemos es un lugar físico, ¿no? Because she ran into the room. Into, it's a preposition, es una preposición, okay? She ran into the passage and found the other 3. Okay. So there we have a key. Es algo físico, ¿no? Algo físico, okay. Vamos a regresar a la pestaña del diccionario y encontramos esas palabras. Okay. La primera es passage, y si tú lo ves bien, tiene una N cursiva. You have italicized. In English, it's italicized. N. Well, that stands for noun. In this case, stands for noun, right? So, nombre. Es un nombre. Okay, so it's a noun. And we know it's a noun. Check. Okay, good. Bueno, ya sabemos que es un noun. All right, physical path. All right, that, it says physical path. Physical path. We have a live audience today, too, so not too many. We're under the limit. Don't worry. It's all good. All right, so physical path in Spanish would be pasillo físico, right? And look at the definition. So what I like about word reference, lo que me gusta de word reference es que te da sinónimas en inglés, o la definición en inglés. So, recuérdate eso, ¿ok? And then, bajo de la línea en español dice camino o pasaje. Ahí lo tienes, la traducción acerca del significado de passage. Passage puede significar camino o puede significar pasaje. Esas son nuestros significados en español de la palabra. Ahora lo tenemos. Ahora déjanos registrarlos o ponerlos una lista que queremos tener. Ok, so, si ya tienes abierto tu página, tu página de tu documento, puedes titularlo como lista de vocabulario, así como yo lo he hecho. Capítulo 2. Ok, so let's write that down. Vamos a escribirlo. Passage, right? So again, passage. All right. And the next one. So if you notice, si notificas, si tomas nota, tenemos 4 columnas. Y vas a ver por qué. Porque en la segunda columna yo voy a escribir N or noun, right? So you can put noun or nombre, lo que quieras, right? Nombre. Porque la palabra es un nombre, right? In the fourth one, I'm going to put the definition. What did they have? They had physical path. Lo voy a escribir en inglés. That's what they gave me, right? Physical path. Very good. Bueno. Y para terminar, la definición en español, la palabra traducida, camino o pasaje. Camino, pasaje. Bueno, completo. Ya tenemos la lista y yo creo que eso te va a ayudar. Me ayudó a mí mientras que yo aprendía varios idiomas, español, incluso árabe y otros. Entonces, yo me gusta tener listas de vocabulario creciendo, y yo creo que se ayuda mucho. All right. Now that we have looked at this strategy to read, to remember vocab, we're going to go ahead and get started and jump right into it. And as we read, I'm going to try and read at a slower pace than normal. I want you, the reader and the listener, to hear the words or read the words that are new to you. Quiero que escuches a las palabras o leas las palabras y haz nota de aquellos que son completamente las palabras que son completamente nuevas para usted, para vosotros. So let's go ahead and get started. Vamos a comenzar. From the beginning, desde el principio del capítulo 3 de The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other 3. "It's all right," she repeated. "I've come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asked Susan. "Why," said Lucy in amazement, "haven't you all been wondering where I was?" "So you've been hiding, have you?" said Peter. "Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. "Batty," said Edmund, tapping his head. "Quite batty." And that's an English expression. Esa es una expresión inglesa británica. Batty puede decir loca, un poco loca, o loco. En este contexto es para referirse a Lucía, entonces es loca. Bueno, ese es el significado más acerca. Y ojo, puedes ponerlo en tu lista si quieras. Si quieres poner Batty, lo puedes poner y buscarlo en el diccionario. Bueno, vamos a continuar. "What do you mean, Lou?" asked Lucy. "What I said," answered Lucy. It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours. And I had tea, and all sorts of things have happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were there then." "She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's making up a story for fun, aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a faun, and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see." The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, "Now, go in and see for yourselves." "Why, you goose." And of course, Susan, is being playful. Right? Está jugando con ella. Goose. Goose es un tipo de... Pues no me recuerdo la palabra en español. No sé si me quieres ayudar, pero... goose es como un pato, ¿no? Un pato grande, podemos decir. Hasta ahora es lo que tengo en mi mente. Pero lo puedes buscar en el diccionario si quieres. Ahí en tu casa, donde estés, lo puedes buscar si quieras. Un ganso. Ganso. Así es, ok. Es un ganso. Okay. Why you ganso? Tu ganso, ¿no? Está practicando en una manera muy ligera, podemos decir, ¿no? Putting her head inside and pulling the fur... Putting her head inside. So inside the wardrobe, right? Inside. And pulling the fur coats apart. It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it. Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart. And they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of the wardrobe, with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. "A jolly good hoax," said Lou. Sorry. "A jolly good hoax, Lou," he said as he came out again. "You have really taken us in, I must admit. We half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly. It was all different a moment ago. Honestly it was. I promise." "Come, Lou," said Peter. That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right. And she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do so. Sorry, let me repeat that. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful. And on this occasion he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy, and kept on asking her if she'd found any other new countries and other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, and so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon, and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the faun had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it is very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it is not a magic one. Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it was a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up as usual, and they smelled of mothballs, and darkness, and silence, and no sign of Lucy. "She thinks I'm Susan come to catch her," said Edmund to himself. "And so she's keeping very quiet in at the back." He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very I'm so sorry, I'm confusing myself. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Sorry. Hey, brother, think you can get me a cup of water, please? I have a cup right over there. Thank you. What are you going to do? When you're going on talking so much, it gets a little hard. All right. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds, and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all, and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. Thank you. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open of its own accord." That's an expression, of its own accord. Accord, like in Spanish, we would say acuerdo, right? So basically, of its own accord, de su propio acuerdo. I would translate this better like its own will, su propio voluntad, right? So acuerdo, yes, it's its own accord, right? But also its own will, right? It's what the expression is trying to say. Es lo que la expresión quiere decir. He forgot all about Lucy and went toward the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe. But instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. There was crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead, there was a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun, just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out to not have been imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too, Edmund." Oh, sorry. Well, I should say it again because it's not quite how he would have said it. "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too, Edmund." There you go. There was no answer. She's angry about all the things I've been saying lately, thought Edmund. And though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place. So he shouted again, I say, Lou, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see now you were right all along. Do come out. Make it Pax. And it's very interesting. In English, modern English, we don't really say this, but make it Pax. It's actually a Latin expression. If you're familiar with Latin, Pax, or Spanish paz, right? That's where the word comes from. Peace in English. That's what it means, right? Make it Pax, right? Hazlo paz, in other words, right? So make peace, right? Between us. Haz paz entre nosotros. Eso es lo que quiere decir. There still was no answer. Just like a girl, said Edmund to himself, sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology. He looked round him again and decided he did not much like this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home, when he heard, very far off in the wood, a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sledge drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sled driving the reindeer sat a fat dwarf, and a dwarf in Spanish is enano, just to let you know, who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sled, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long, straight golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sled was a fine sight, as it came sweeping toward Edmund, with the bells jingling, and the dwarf cracking his whip, and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop," said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharp that they almost sat down. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you? And what, pray, are you?" I repeat, because the word pray there is used in a different way than it's normally used. La palabra pray, or, well, we'll get to that in a second, but pray, en inglés, en ese contexto, no está usado como normalmente lo usamos. Pray, en inglés, puede significar pray como orar o rezar, orar o rezar, la misma cosa. Pray. Also, it could mean, in a way, suplicar, como te estoy suplicando. Si digo, I pray you, tell me who you are, to reword the sentence, I pray of you, or I pray you, is saying, I ask you strongly, te demando, o te imploro, pues hay varias formas de decirlo, pero es como te suplico, ¿no? That's what this word means, right? So, and what, pray, are you? So, she's saying, ¿y qué te suplico? Said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund, said Edmund, rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. Is that how you address a queen? She asked, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know, said Edmund. Not now. Oh, sorry. Not know the Queen of Narnia? Cried she. Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you? Please, your majesty, said Edmund. I don't know what you mean. I'm at school, at least I was. It's the holidays now. And with that sentence, we complete chapter 3. Y con esa oración concluyemos capítulo 3 de este libro, El León, la Bruja y el Armario. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So thank you for joining us. Do we have questions? Someone's asking about hooks? All right, good. So yeah, sorry, we are on live stream, so I forgot to repeat this at the beginning, but you can send in your questions. So thank you for asking that. Hoax, in Spanish, there are different words. One word I like is chiringuito. Chiringuito, if you don't know the word, is a particular word, but chiringuito is the best translation for a hoax. A hoax is something false. It is something that's fake that you present to someone. It doesn't have to be an object. It could be something. So let's say we use it often in business, right? So like una estafa en un negocio es algo falso, ¿no? Que alguien quiere engañar a alguien más, ¿no? Quieren engañarle, right? So to deceive someone with, right? In other words, engañar, to deceive. So a hoax, you could say, is una estafa, un chiringuito, etc. So that would be the best translation for that. Any other comments? No? Okay. So with that, I hope that you took note. I'm glad to see that someone was, at least, of those who were watching, those who were listening, de todos aquellos que estuvieron escuchando y oyendo, que tomaron notas. Espero que tomaran notas del vocabulario. I hope that you were listening and taking notes of the vocabulary, de las palabras nuevas, and that I recommend that you take the suggestion. Recomiendo que tomes la sugerencia de hacer una lista propia de usted. Haz una lista de todas las palabras nuevas y toma el tiempo para traducirlos en el diccionario que hemos dado el link que hemos dado. So, without further ado, we're going to cut it here. Thank you for joining us. This is the Potter's House Christian Church. God loves you. We just want to share the message real quickly with you that Jesus is the only way to know God. Queremos compartir con vosotros que Jesucristo es la única manera para conocer al Padre Celestial. Si quieres ser libre y experimentar la libertad de la verdad, encuentra a Jesús, busca una iglesia cerca de ti, busca recursos para acercarse a Jesús. Solo requiere una oración, y esa oración es de arrepentimiento. Si quieres conocer más y saber más eso, contáctanos, queremos ayudaros. And that's about it. Oh, don't forget about our challenge. No te olvides de nuestro reto. Si recibimos más de 100 o más vistas en nuestras lecturas, yo voy a tocar la flauta para vosotros. Voy a traer la flauta de acá y antes de, pues vamos a hacer un video especial y voy a compartir esta música de Narnia, Narnia Lullaby de Disney film, de la película de Disney, de este libro. Okay, so that's about it. That's all we have for you today. Thank you again for joining us. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Te veremos la próxima semana con el próximo capítulo del León, la Bruja y el Armario. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. See you next week.